It was a cold winter morning when a sleek black car stopped near a quiet street corner. Inside the car sat a man known for his success, wealth, and calm attitude. He was a billionaire who had built his empire through years of hard work. But behind his serious eyes was a story of loss, the loss of his beloved wife, who had passed away years ago in a tragic accident. Ever since that day, his world had changed completely. He focused only on business and raising his little boy, who was just a baby when his mother died. Now the boy was around 6 years old, curious, innocent, and full of life. He was the only light in his father's world. The man made sure his son had everything, the best toys, the best school, and all the love he could give. Yet there was always something missing. The warmth of a mother's touch, the softness of a mother's voice. That morning, as the car stopped at a red light, the boy looked outside through the window. His bright eyes caught sight of a woman sitting on the sidewalk. She was dressed in torn clothes, her hair messy, and her face tired. She looked like she had been through a lot. She was holding a small cardboard sign that said, "Hungry and homeless, please help." The boy stared at her for a few seconds. Then suddenly he turned to his father and tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, she looks like Mom," he said softly. The man froze for a moment. He didn't know how to respond. His son rarely talked about his mother because he didn't remember much. But the way he said it, so sure, so innocent, it sent a strange feeling through the man's chest. He looked outside the window. The homeless woman sat quietly staring at the ground. Her face was pale, but something about her expression seemed oddly familiar. The man's heart started beating faster. No, it couldn't be. His wife had died in an accident. He had seen the wreckage, attended the funeral. There was no way this woman could be her. But still, he couldn't look away. The traffic light turned green and the driver started to move, but the man quickly said, "Stop the car." The driver hesitated but obeyed. The man got out, adjusting his coat against the cold wind. His son watched from the car as his father slowly walked toward the woman. As he got closer, he noticed how thin she was, how her hands trembled slightly from the cold. She looked up when she heard footsteps, her eyes dull but cautious. For a brief second, their eyes met, and the man felt a strange wave of emotion. Her eyes, they looked just like his wife's, the same deep, kind eyes that used to smile at him every morning. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked gently. The woman blinked a few times as if trying to remember something. "I'm fine," she whispered weakly, "just a little hungry." Her voice cracked and it made his heart twist. That voice, and so soft, so familiar. It made old memories rush back. He knelt down beside her. Do I know you?" he asked hesitantly. She looked confused for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I don't think so," she murmured. But there was something in her tone, a hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty, that made him think she wasn't telling the full truth. The man took out his wallet and handed her some money. "Please buy yourself something warm to eat," he said softly. She looked at the money, then back at him. Her lips trembled, and for a second tears filled her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're very kind." He nodded, but inside his mind thoughts were racing. The resemblance was too strong to ignore. Her voice, her eyes, even the small scar near her eyebrow, everything reminded him of his late wife. But how could that be? He had accepted her death long ago. This couldn't be her. It must be someone who just looked like her. He turned back to his car, his heart heavy with confusion. His son was waiting eagerly, his little face pressed against the window. When his father got inside, the boy asked, "Daddy, is she okay? Did you talk to Mom?" The man's hands froze on the steering wheel. "She's not Mom," he said quietly, though even he wasn't sure if he believed his own words. As the car drove away, he couldn't stop glancing back through the window. The woman sat there holding the money close, but her eyes followed the car as it disappeared down the road. There was something in her expression, a quiet sadness mixed with a spark of recognition. That night, the billionaire couldn't sleep. The image of the homeless woman haunted him. He couldn't get her eyes out of his mind. Something deep inside whispered that there was more to this than coincidence. He decided he had to find out who she was, and even if it meant digging into the past he had tried so hard to bury, he didn't know yet that what he was about to discover would change his life forever. The next morning, the billionaire woke up earlier than usual. He had barely slept, All night his mind kept circling back to that woman on the street. Her tired face, her familiar eyes, her trembling voice. Every detail reminded him of someone he had loved deeply and lost forever. He tried to brush it off as coincidence, but something inside him refused to believe it was just that. Over breakfast, his son talked excitedly about school and toys, but then he suddenly asked, "Daddy, can we see that lady again today?" The man looked up from his coffee, surprised. "What lady?" "The one from yesterday," the boy said softly. "The one who looked like Mom. I want to give her my blanket." She looked really cold. The man felt his heart tighten. His son's innocence was pure honest. Maybe it was fate that they had met her. "All right," he said finally. "We'll go after I finish some work." After dropping his son at school, the billionaire told his driver to take the same route as yesterday. When they reached the corner, he looked around carefully. The spot where the woman had been sitting was empty. There was no sign of her. He got out of the car and asked a few shopkeepers nearby if they had seen her, but most just shook their heads. One old man selling newspapers said, "She sometimes comes here in the mornings. Then she disappears for a few days. Poor soul doesn't talk much." The billionaire thanked him and returned to the car, feeling strangely disappointed. For reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted to find her again. It wasn't just curiosity, and it was something deeper, something emotional. The next few days passed, but he couldn't focus on his business meetings. His assistants noticed his distracted behavior, but no one dared to ask. Every evening he drove by the same street hoping to see her again. And finally, one evening he did. She was sitting near a closed bakery, shivering under an old blanket. Without hesitation, he stopped the car and walked toward her. When she saw him, she looked startled, almost as if she had been expecting him yet didn't know what to say. "You again," she whispered. "Yes," he said gently. "I've been looking for you," she frowned. "Why? I don't even know you." He sat down on the cold pavement beside her. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But you remind me of someone I lost a long time ago." She looked down, silent for a moment. "Sometimes people say I look like others," she murmured. "Maybe that's all it is." He studied her closely. Her hands were thin, but he noticed a faint scar on her wrist, the same one his wife had from an accident years ago. His chest tightened again. "Do you remember anything about your past?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, not really. I only remember waking up in a hospital years ago. They said I was in a car accident. I didn't remember my name or where I came from. After that, life just went on somehow." His heart skipped a beat. A car accident. That was exactly how his wife had died. At least that's what the police had told him. He tried to stay calm. "Do you have any papers from the hospital? Any ID?" She looked at him, puzzled. "No, I lost everything when I started living on the streets." The man sat back, speechless. It couldn't be true. And yet everything matched. The accident. The timing. The resemblance. Could it really be her, alive but lost all these years? He finally stood up and said quietly, "Let me help you. I can get you food, a warm place to stay. You don't have to live like this." But she shook her head quickly. "No, I don't want pity. People have helped before, and it never ends well. I don't trust easily anymore." He looked into her eyes and said softly, "It's not pity. It's something I owe, to someone I once loved very much." She stared at him for a moment, confused and emotional. Something in his tone touched her heart. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Just for one night," she whispered. That night, he brought her to a quiet guest house near his home. He arranged food, clothes, and a warm bed for her. As she ate silently, he watched her carefully, the way she moved, the small habits that reminded him of his wife. Even the way she closed her eyes when drinking water, it was the same. When she finished eating, she looked at him and said softly, "Why are you really helping me?" He took a deep breath. "Because I think you're someone important to me. Someone I thought I'd lost forever." She looked startled, then nervous. "You're mistaken," she said quickly. "I don't remember you." He didn't argue. Instead, he said quietly, "Maybe you don't remember, but maybe your heart does." She didn't reply, but her eyes filled with tears. Something deep inside her stirred. Flashes of laughter, warmth, a child's face, all blurry but painfully familiar. That night, she couldn't sleep. In her dreams, she saw a small boy running toward her, calling Mom. She woke up trembling, tears rolling down her cheeks. In the morning, when the billionaire came to check on her, she looked pale and shaken. "I saw something," she whispered. "A dream, or maybe a memory. There was a child. A little boy, I think. I think he was mine." The man stood frozen. His heart pounded. Could it be true? Was the woman sitting before him really his lost wife? Alive, but with no memory of her past? He didn't know yet, but deep inside, he felt that fate had brought her back for a reason. The morning sunlight gently filtered through the curtains of the guesthouse room. The woman sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at her hands. Her mind was heavy, filled with flashes of dreams and half-formed memories that didn't make sense. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the face of a small boy calling her mom. The sound of his voice felt so real that it made her chest tighten. When the door opened, the billionaire walked in quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. He looked tired but calm. "Good morning," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" She looked up, her voice trembling. I don't know. Something strange is happening to me. I keep seeing faces I can't remember. A child's face. And yours." He handed her the cup and sat down on the chair across from her. "Maybe it's your memory trying to come back," he said gently. "Sometimes our hearts remember what the mind forgets." She stared into her tea, silent for a moment. "You said yesterday that I remind you of someone. Who is she?" He took a deep breath. "My wife," he said slowly. "She died in a car accident years ago. Or at least that's what I was told. But you," his voice faltered for a second, "you look exactly like her. Your eyes, your voice, even the way you speak, everything." Her eyes widened slightly. "You think I'm her?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I can't ignore what I feel. The day my son saw you, he said you looked like his mom. And he never says things like that." Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "You have a son?" He nodded. "Yes, he was just a baby when it happened. He's 6 now. The only reason I kept going after losing her was because of him." The woman's lips trembled. "I saw that boy in my dream," she said in a shaky voice. "He was smiling at me. He called me Mom." The billionaire's heart pounded in his chest. He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "Then maybe it wasn't just a dream." She looked confused and scared. "But how is that possible? The doctors told me my past was gone. I don't even know my name." He reached into his pocket and took out his phone. He opened an old photo, one of his wife smiling with their newborn baby in her arms. He showed it to her silently. The woman's hands trembled as she took the phone. The moment she saw the picture, something inside her shifted. Her breathing quickened, her eyes filled with tears, and her fingers shook as if her body remembered what her mind couldn't. She whispered. "I know this baby." Her voice broke as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I remember holding him. He was crying and I sang to him. I can still hear the song." She began humming softly, almost without realizing it. The same lullaby the billionaire's wife used to sing to their child. The man's eyes welled up. He covered his mouth with his hand, trying to stay composed, but the emotion was too strong. "That song," he said in a trembling voice. "She used to sing it every night to our son." The woman looked up, tears streaming down her face. "What's happening to me?" He moved closer, gently placing his hand over hers. "You're remembering," he said softly. "You're coming back." For the first time, she didn't pull away. She just sat there, crying silently as pieces of her lost life began to flicker inside her mind. That evening, the billionaire took her to a quiet park near his home. The air was cool and children were playing around. She sat on a bench watching them, her eyes soft but distant. He pointed toward one of the children running nearby. "That's my son," he said gently. The boy waved happily when he saw his father and ran toward them. The woman's breath caught in her throat as the boy came closer. His bright smile, his soft brown hair. He looked so familiar it hurt. "Hi," the boy said cheerfully, looking at her with innocent curiosity. "You're the nice lady from the street." She smiled weakly. "Yes, I remember you." The boy sat beside her and held out a small flower he had picked. "This is for you," he said proudly. "Daddy says you weren't feeling well." She took the flower with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're very kind." Then suddenly the boy leaned closer and said, "You smell like Mom." The billionaire froze, his eyes wide. He didn't expect his son to say that again. But the woman didn't react with surprise this time. Instead, tears filled her eyes once more. "Do I?" she asked softly. The boy nodded innocently. "Mom used to smell like flowers, just like you." Something inside her broke. She reached out slowly and touched his cheek, her hand shaking. "You have her eyes," she whispered, though she didn't even realize she was talking about herself. So bright, so full of life. The billionaire felt his throat tighten. He could see the truth in her eyes now, the recognition, the love, the pain. She didn't have all her memories back, but her heart knew who this child was. As the boy ran off to play again, she turned to the man, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't understand how, but I feel something. Like I belong with him, with you." He looked at her with tears glistening in his eyes. "That's because you do." She turned away, looking at the sunset. "If what you're saying is true, then why didn't anyone find me?" He took a deep breath, his voice heavy. There was confusion after the accident. The car was completely destroyed. The police said there was no chance anyone survived. I believed them. I buried a body they said was yours. The woman's face went pale. "Then who was it?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but I promise I'll find out. I'll find the truth no matter what." The woman stared at him, torn between fear and hope. Somewhere deep inside, she wanted to believe him, to believe that she wasn't lost anymore. As the sun disappeared behind the clouds, the billionaire looked at her and whispered, "You're not alone now. Not anymore." She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his words sink in. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever. The feeling of being home. The days that followed were filled with confusion, hope, and fear all at once. The billionaire had arranged for the woman to stay in a small, comfortable guest house near his mansion. He wanted her to have peace, warmth, and food, but most of all, safety. He didn't tell anyone about her yet, not even his business associates or close friends. He needed time to be sure. Every morning he visited her. They would talk over breakfast, sometimes about the past, sometimes about small everyday things. Each day she remembered something new, little flashes of memory that felt both painful and beautiful. One day she remembered the smell of the sea during their honeymoon. Another day she described the baby's first laugh. Every memory she recovered brought tears to both their eyes. The billionaire's son visited her often too. He loved spending time with her, showing her his drawings and toys. The connection between them grew naturally. She would listen to him with a soft smile, and sometimes, without realizing it, she called him my boy. The child didn't question it. To him, it felt right. But deep inside, the woman still struggled. She wanted to believe she was the person they thought she was, but the missing pieces of her memory frightened her. "What if I'm wrong?" she said one evening as they sat in the garden. "What if I'm not her and I'm just someone who looks like her?" The billionaire looked at her, his expression gentle but firm. "Even if that were true, it doesn't change what I feel. You've brought something back into our lives that I thought was gone forever, but I don't think you're just someone who looks like her. I think you are her." She looked away, her eyes glistening. "I want to believe that too," she whispered. "But sometimes when I try to remember, it hurts. It feels like my mind is fighting me." He nodded slowly. "Maybe it's not your mind fighting. Maybe it's the pain you've carried for so long. We'll find out the truth together." The next morning, the billionaire decided to visit the hospital where the woman said she had woken up years ago. He managed to get access to their old medical records. What he discovered made his hands tremble. There was indeed a woman admitted around the same time as his wife's supposed accident. Her name was marked as unknown female car crash victim. The doctors had written that she suffered from head trauma and partial memory loss. He stared at the report for several minutes, unable to breathe. The description, the timeline, everything matched perfectly. He immediately arranged for a DNA test to be done, carefully, secretly. He collected a few strands of her hair and his son's for comparison. When the results came in 2 days later, his heart nearly stopped. The report confirmed it beyond doubt, and the woman was his wife. Tears filled his eyes. After all these years, after all the grief and loneliness, she had been alive. Lost, forgotten, but alive. He couldn't wait any longer. That evening he went to see her. She was sitting by the window watching the sunset, her hair glowing softly in the orange light. "I found something," he said quietly, his voice shaking slightly. She looked at him, curious but nervous. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "Proof. That you're not just someone who looks like her. You are her. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? He showed her the document, his hands trembling. The hospital records, the DNA test. Everything. You're my wife. You survived that accident. For a long moment, she just stared at him, speechless. Then her hands began to shake and tears streamed down her cheeks. I'm her? She whispered. He nodded, his voice breaking. Yes, you're the woman I've loved all my life. You're the mother of my son. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. The memories that had been buried deep inside began flooding back. The sound of the baby's laughter, the warmth of her husband's embrace, the day of the accident. She remembered driving that night, the rain, the bright headlights that came out of nowhere, and the crash that followed. She remembered waking up in pain, not knowing who she was, not remembering anything. I thought I died that night, she whispered. Everything went dark. When I woke up, I didn't know my name. I didn't know who I was. I tried to start over, but life kept pushing me down. I was scared to ask for help because I didn't know who to trust. The billionaire moved closer and gently took her hands. You don't have to be scared anymore. You're home now. You're safe. She looked up at him through tears. All these years. You thought I was gone. He nodded slowly. I never stopped missing you. Every single day I wished I could see you one more time. And now, after all these years, you're here. At that moment, the door opened softly and their little boy peeked in. Daddy, he said, are you crying? The billionaire quickly wiped his tears and smiled. No, buddy. These are happy tears. The woman turned toward the child, her heart pounding. She didn't need anyone to tell her, she knew. This was her son. Every part of her heart recognized him. She opened her arms and the boy ran straight into them, hugging her tightly. Mom, he whispered softly, as if the word had been waiting on his lips all along. She held him close, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she felt whole again. The emptiness that had haunted her was gone. She was home, in the arms of her family. The billionaire stood beside them, his heart overflowing with gratitude and love. Fate had done something he thought was impossible. It had given him back the one person he had loved more than anything in the world. But deep down, a question still lingered. Who was the person buried in her place all those years ago? He didn't know yet, but he was determined to find out, because the truth he knew wasn't over. It was only beginning. For the next few weeks, the billionaire's house slowly turned from a quiet mansion into a warm home again. Laughter echoed through the hallways, soft music filled the air, and for the first time in years, peace returned. The woman, now knowing who she truly was, began to regain more and more of her memory. Some memories came back easily. Her son's first birthday, her husband's smile when he used to surprise her with breakfast, the sound of the rain the night before their accident. Others were harder, painful flashes of the crash, bright lights, broken glass, and fear. Each time those memories surfaced, she would hold her husband's hand tightly and he would whisper, "You're safe now. You're home." Their son couldn't be happier. Every morning he would run into her arms and she would hug him tightly as if afraid to let go. The bond between them grew stronger with every passing day. The billionaire watched them, often standing silently at the doorway, tears in his eyes, grateful that life had given him back what he thought was lost forever. But even amid all the joy, one question refused to leave his mind. Who was the person buried in her place? The thought haunted him. He couldn't rest until he knew the truth. One morning he called the detective who had handled his wife's case years ago. The detective was surprised to hear from him after so long, but when the billionaire explained what had happened, the man agreed to reopen the old files. Days passed, and then the detective called. "Sir," he said seriously, "there's something you need to know. The body we found in your wife's car. It wasn't hers." The billionaire's heart skipped a beat. "Then who was it?" The detective sighed. "We checked the hospital records again. Around the same time, another woman went missing. Her name was Clara. She had been working as your wife's assistant. We believe she was with her the night of the accident. Based on the evidence, it looks like your wife's car was hit by another vehicle. Clara might have switched seats before the crash, maybe trying to save her. When the explosion happened, the body in the driver's seat was unrecognizable, so we assumed it was your wife's." The billionaire felt a chill run through his body. "So when my wife survived because her assistant saved her?" "It looks that way," the detective replied quietly. The impact must have thrown your wife out of the car before it caught fire. By the time rescue teams arrived, she was unconscious and far from the wreck. She was taken to a hospital under an unknown name. That's how the mix-up happened. After ending the call, the billionaire sat in silence for a long time. He couldn't believe it. All these years, his wife had been alive because someone else had sacrificed herself for her. It was tragic, but also beautiful in its own way. That evening, he told his wife the truth. She broke down crying, both in grief and gratitude. "She saved me," she whispered, holding her hands to her face. "All this time I've been alive because she gave her life for mine." He pulled her close and said softly, "She didn't die for nothing." Her courage brought you back to us. In the following days, they decided to visit Clara's family. The meeting was emotional. Her parents were old and frail, living in a small town. When they saw the woman standing at their doorstep, they were stunned. The mother burst into tears. "You're alive," she whispered. The woman shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she said. "It wasn't me who died. It was Clara. She saved me, and I didn't even remember until now." Clara's parents cried and hugged her. "She always cared about you," her father said softly. "She used to say you were like her." Sister, the billionaire promised to support Clara's parents for the rest of their lives. It was the least he could do to honor the woman who had made the ultimate sacrifice. After that visit, a sense of closure began to fill their hearts. The woman no longer felt lost. She no longer felt like a stranger in her own skin. The pieces of her life had finally come together. The love, the loss, the survival, and the second chance that fate had given her. One evening, the three of them, husband, wife, and child, stood together in the garden watching the stars. The air was calm and the boy held both their hands tightly. "Mom," the boy said softly, "are you going to stay forever now?" The woman smiled through tears and knelt down to his level. "Yes, my love," she said, kissing his forehead. "I'm never leaving again." The billionaire stood behind them, his heart full. He looked at the stars above and whispered a quiet thank you, to fate, to Clara, and to life itself for giving him back what mattered most. From that day on, the woman began helping at his charity foundation, focusing on helping homeless women and children. She knew what it felt like to be forgotten, lost, and hopeless. Her story became a message of strength, that even in the darkest corners, love could find its way back. The billionaire often watched her working with people, smiling, caring, and spreading warmth wherever she went. She wasn't just his wife anymore, she was a symbol of hope. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, he wrapped his arm around her and whispered, "You know, if that day hadn't happened, we might have never learned what real love means." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "Maybe sometimes life takes everything from us," she said softly, "just so we can learn how precious love truly is." He smiled and kissed her forehead. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that." As the golden light faded and their son laughed nearby, the world felt peaceful again. Their story, once filled with loss and pain, had turned into one of rediscovery, forgiveness, and unbreakable love. It was a reminder that even when life tears everything apart, miracles can still find their way home.